The holographic recruitment notice had been a mistake. That much was obvious to Arya Bennett the moment she stepped foot on the massive interplanetary military station orbiting Proxima Centauri. Even the processing officer, a towering four-armed Corsian with translucent skin revealing pulsing multicolored veins, had done a double-take when she approached the registration terminal. Human. The officer's voice emerged as a series of clicks and whistles instantly translated by the neural implant all recruits received upon shuttle boarding. The translator couldn't mask the incredulity in the alien's tone. There must be an error in the system. Arya straightened her spine and tried to look taller than her 5'6" frame allowed. No error, sir. Arya Bennett reporting for the 87th Interstellar Defense Force Training Cohort. The Corsians' 8 eyes blinked in rapid succession, their species equivalent of laughter. Fascinating. The coalition must be truly desperate to accept terrestrials. The way the officer said terrestrials made it sound like vermin. Arya bit the inside of her cheek to keep from responding. She'd expected this kind of reception. Humans were the newcomers to the coalition of sentient species, having only achieved faster than light travel 50 years ago. Most species viewed humans as primitive, weak, and intellectually underwhelming. The fact that Earth had been admitted to the coalition at all was largely due to the planet's strategic location and abundant resources, not out of any respect for humankind. "I have my acceptance credentials," Arya said, pushing forward the holographic disc containing her information. The Corsian reluctantly accepted it, pressing the disc against a glowing panel. After a moment, the alien emitted what sounded like a resigned sigh. "It seems you are indeed registered. How unexpected." The officer returned the disc and gestured toward a narrow corridor bathed in purple light. "Proceed to Adaptation Chamber 12 for environmental adjustments and equipment allocation, though I suspect the equipment will be excessive for your species' capabilities." Arya took the disc and marched toward the corridor, ignoring the stares from other recruits. Massive, intimidating beings from across the known universe. Some had evolved on gas giants, with crushing gravity giving them incredible strength. Others came from predator species with heightened senses and natural weapons. A few weren't even carbon-based. And then there was Arya, an ordinary human woman with no special abilities beyond her determination. The adaptation chamber was a sterile white room where various machines analyzed her biological makeup. A medical technician, a small amphibious creature with webbed hands and bioluminescent patches, scrutinized the results with visible confusion. "You are remarkably fragile," the technician stated, not bothering to hide their assessment. "Low muscle density, minimal protective coating, inefficient respiratory system, suboptimal sensory capabilities, and virtually no natural defenses." The aliens shook their head, causing their bioluminescent patches to flash in patterns. "How does your species survive in the wild?" "We're adaptable," Arya replied, trying to keep the defensiveness from her voice. "And we're smarter than we look." The technician made a bubbling sound, perhaps their version of a dismissive snort. "Adaptation and intelligence are measurable quantities human. Your species falls short on objective scales." Arya had heard variations of this sentiment her entire life. When humans had first made contact with the coalition, Earth's representatives had quickly discovered that by galactic standards, humans were considered physically inferior and intellectually unremarkable. What humans considered their greatest strengths, adaptability, creativity, emotional intelligence, were seen as evolutionary oddities rather than advantages by most species. Coalition scientists theorized that humans had evolved these traits precisely because they lacked physical capabilities, a conclusion that did little to improve humanity's standing. "Let's just get on with it," Arya said. The technician gestured toward a cylindrical chamber. "Enter the module for environmental resistance enhancement, though I must warn you the process was designed for more resilient organisms. You may experience discomfort." That turned out to be a grotesque understatement. The enhancement felt like every cell in Arya's body was being simultaneously torn apart and reassembled. When she emerged, trembling and nauseous, the technician appeared genuinely surprised. "You survived. Most impressive. For a human. The enhancement should allow you to withstand the environmental conditions in the training zones." They handed her a sleek black uniform. "Your combat gear. It contains automated defensive systems to compensate for your physical limitations." Arya accepted the gear without comment. She'd expected the condescension, had prepared for it mentally during the long journey from Earth. What she hadn't prepared for was the bone-deep fatigue that now permeated her body after the enhancement process. "Proceed to Barracks 7, the technician instructed. "Training begins at first cycle tomorrow, though I feel obligated to inform you that humans rarely progress beyond basic training. Perhaps you should consider administrative roles more suited to your capabilities." "I'll take my chances with combat training," Arya replied, voice steady despite her exhaustion. The technician's bioluminescent patches pulsed in what might have been amusement. "As you wish. Survival is, after all, the first test." Barracks 7 was a cavernous room with sleeping pods arranged in concentric circles. Each pod was designed to accommodate a wide range of body types and environmental needs. Arya found hers the smallest in the barracks and placed her hand on the recognition panel. The pod hissed open, revealing a modest space that would serve as her home during training. As she stowed her few belongings, she became acutely aware of the silence that had fallen over the barracks. Looking up, she found herself the focus of attention from dozens of alien recruits, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. A massive reptilian being with iridescent scales approached her pod. The neural translator identified the species as Drakari, evolved from apex predators on a jungle world with twice Earth's gravity. "They're accepting prey animals now," the Drakari hissed, addressing the room rather than Arya directly. "How are we supposed to conduct proper combat training with food?" Several recruits made sounds of agreement, while others simply watched, perhaps curious how the human would respond. Arya had promised herself she wouldn't rise to provocations. Her acceptance into the program had been unexpected, possibly a clerical error, as the processing officer had suggested, but she was here now and determined to prove her worth. Engaging in confrontation on her first day would only reinforce stereotypes about human emotionality. "I'm not food," she said calmly, standing to face the Drakari. "I'm a recruit, same as you." The reptilian being leaned down until its face was inches from hers. Its breath smelled like metal and something sweet. "Not the same. Never the same. You're here by mistake, human. The Coalition doesn't send food to fight its battles." Before Arya could respond, another voice cut through the tension, a deep resonant sound that seemed to vibrate the air itself. "Enough Talox. Save your intimidation tactics for the training grounds." The crowd of recruits parted as a new figure approached. Arya had to tilt her head back to take in the full height of the being, at least 8 feet tall with a powerful build covered in short midnight black fur. The creature moved with predatory grace, each step perfectly controlled. 4 amber eyes studied her with unnerving intensity, and wickedly curved claws extended from powerful hands. The neural translator identified the species Vraxian, native to a death world at the edge of Coalition space. Evolved as pursuit predators capable of hunting in any environment. Extremely dangerous. Vraxler. The Drakari acknowledged, stepping back with obvious reluctance. "I was merely welcoming our unusual recruit." The Vraxian Vraxler made a dismissive gesture. "Your welcome is noted. Now, leave." The Drakari hesitated only briefly before retreating, followed by most of the other recruits. Arya found herself alone with the Vraxian, who continued to study her with those unblinking amber eyes. "Thank you," she said, unsure of the proper protocol. "Don't thank me, human," Vraxler replied. "I didn't intervene for your benefit. Combat units require discipline and hierarchy. Talox overstepped. Still, I appreciate it." The Vraxian tilted his head slightly. You're smaller than I expected. Humans are described as fragile, but you appear particularly breakable. Arya had to stop herself from sighing. I'm stronger than I look. Doubtful, Vraxler replied without malice, simply stating what he perceived as fact. You won't survive the first training cycle. I will. Your confidence is misplaced, but interesting. I've studied your species. You lack natural weapons, significant strength, or enhanced senses. Yet you dominated your home planet. A curious evolutionary outcome. Before Arya could respond, an announcement echoed through the barracks. All recruits prepare for initial assessment. Proceed to Training Zone 1 in 15 minutes. The Vraxian's 4 eyes narrowed slightly. Initial assessment determines combat groupings. It separates predators from prey. His gaze lingered on her for a moment longer. Try not to die, human. It creates unnecessary paperwork. With that, he turned and walked away, his movements fluid and silent, despite his size. Arya took a deep breath and began changing into her combat gear. The uniform adjusted to her body, automatically tightening in some places and expanding in others until it fit perfectly. Despite the technician's dismissive attitude, the gear was impressive lightweight, but apparently durable with integrated systems she couldn't begin to understand. As she finished preparing, a thought occurred to her that she hadn't fully processed. Until now, she was the only human in the barracks, possibly the only human in the entire training station. The realization should have been intimidating, but instead, Arya felt a strange sense of purpose. If she was going to be the sole representative of humanity in this program, then she would ensure she represented her species well. She had 15 minutes until the assessment began, 15 minutes to prepare for whatever challenges awaited her. 15 minutes before she would begin proving that humans deserved their place among the stars. The initial assessment was, in a word, brutal. Training Zone 1 turned out to be a massive multi-environmental arena. Parts resembled alien jungles, with strange bioluminescent vegetation. Others were barren wastelands with shifting terrain. Some sections appeared to be liquid, not water, but something denser, more viscous. Environmental barriers separated the different zones, creating distinct challenges. The assessment itself was simple in concept: survive. Recruits were released into the arena and subjected to a series of increasingly difficult challenges designed to test their physical capabilities, reaction times, and combat instincts. For the more physically powerful species, these challenges involved feats of strength or endurance, lifting massive objects, withstanding environmental extremes, or battling combat drones. For Arya, however, the challenges seemed specifically designed to exploit human weaknesses. When she was directed to cross a chasm using only the thin, flexible buttons hanging from the ceiling, a trivial task for species with natural climbing abilities, or significant upper body strength, she felt the familiar sting of being underestimated. But rather than attempt the crossing as instructed, Arya took a moment to study the arena. The vines were spaced too far apart for her to reliably swing from one to another, but the walls of the chasm had subtle indentations, imperfections in the synthetic material that might provide handholds. They weren't obvious, and she suspected they weren't intentionally part of the challenge. While other recruits swung across effortlessly, Arya approached the edge and began carefully scaling the wall itself. Her progress was slow, methodical. Each handhold had to be tested before she trusted it with her weight. She felt the stares of both recruits and instructors, heard the dismissive comments about her unorthodox approach. The human avoids the intended challenge, one instructor noted, typical of their species to seek easier paths. But Arya continued focusing on each movement. The wall grew slick in places, nearly causing her to lose her grip multiple times. Her muscles burned with the effort. Yet she persisted, ignoring the pain, the doubt, the judgment of those watching. When she finally pulled herself up on the opposite side of the chasm, she was exhausted but satisfied. She had completed the challenge not in the way expected, but but in a way that worked for her limitations. The lead instructor, a towering crystalline being that seemed to shimmer with internal light, approached her. Interesting solution. Human? Unconventional, possibly even clever, but real combat doesn't allow for such creative interpretations of obstacles. Real combat is about survival and accomplishing objectives. Arya replied, still catching her breath. I crossed the chasm. Objective accomplished. The crystalline being made a sound like wind through crystal chimes, perhaps laughter, perhaps something else. We shall see if that attitude serves you in the next phase. The next phase involved combat drones' sleek metallic constructs designed to adapt to each recruit's capabilities. For the Drakari and other physically imposing species, the drones were massive, heavily armored, and equipped with multiple weapon systems. For Arya, the drone was smaller, lighter, but no less lethal. As soon as she entered the combat zone, the drone attacked with frightening speed. Its limbs extended into blade-like appendages that sliced through the air inches from her face. Arya ducked and rolled narrowly, avoiding decapitation. The drone pursued relentlessly, its movements calculated to corner her. Unlike the physical challenges, there was no obvious alternative approach here. She couldn't outmuscle the drone, couldn't match its speed or precision. But as she continued to evade, Arya began to notice patterns in the drone's attacks. It favored right-side approaches, had a slight delay after complex movement sequences, and most importantly, seemed to predict her movements based on standard combat protocols. So Arya began moving unpredictably. Rather than retreat from attacks in straight lines, she zigzagged chaotically. Instead of attempting to counterstrike after dodging, she deliberately placed herself in positions that appeared vulnerable but gave her options for escape. The drone's programming struggled to adapt to her seemingly irrational movements. Its attacks became less coordinated as it attempted to recalculate engagement strategies. That's when Arya saw her opportunity. During a momentary pause in the drone's assault, she grabbed a handful of the arena's loose substrate, a fine sand-like material, and flung it directly at the drone's optical sensors. It was a desperate move, one that wouldn't have worked on many species, but might confuse the drone's targeting systems. The sand particles scattered across the drone's face, temporarily obscuring its visual inputs. In that brief window of opportunity, Arya sprinted toward a section of the arena wall where she had noticed a protruding piece of metallic debris. She grabbed it, improvising a crude weapon, and when the drone charged at her again, she timed her counterattack perfectly, jamming the metal shard directly into a joint in the drone's chassis. The drone emitted a high-pitched whine and ceased functioning, its limbs retracting into its body as emergency shutdown protocols engaged. A silence fell over the observation area. Arya stood panting, metal shards still clutched in her hand, waiting for the next attack that didn't come. The crystalline instructor approached once again, this time accompanied by several others. Unorthodox tactics, human. The combat drones are programmed with data from thousands of combat encounters across hundreds of species. Yet you managed to surprise it. Arya didn't respond, still catching her breath. However, the instructor continued, your physical capabilities remain underwhelming. In real combat scenarios, superior strength and speed typically prevail over tactical improvisation. Then why did I win? Arya asked. The instructor's crystalline form pulsed with colors. You disabled a training drone designed specifically for human capabilities. That hardly constitutes winning by coalition standards. Before Arya could respond, another voice joined the conversation, the deep resonant voice of Vraxleer. The human adapted, the Vraxian stated, approaching with that same predatory grace. Adaptation has value in combat. The instructor turned toward Vraxleer. Your assessment, Vraxian. Place her in advanced training, Vraxler, said those four amber eyes briefly meeting Arya's gaze. With the predator units. A murmur spread through the gathered instructors and recruits. The crystalline being's colors shifted rapidly. That would be unprecedented. Humans have traditionally been assigned to support roles or defensive units at best. I will vouch for her placement. Vraxlear insisted, a note of finality in his tone. My hunt team has an opening. The significance of this statement wasn't lost on anyone present. Vraxians were notorious for their selective hunting partnerships, typically only working with species they considered worthy predators. No human had ever been considered for such a position. Very well, the instructor conceded after a moment. The human will be assigned to your hunt team, Vraxian, but the responsibility for her performance and survival falls to you. Vraxlear acknowledged this with a slight inclination of his head before turning to Arya. Report to Training Zone 3 at next cycle. Bring only yourself. Equipment will be provided. As the Vraxian walked away, Arya noticed the stares from other recruits, some curious, others openly hostile. She had somehow managed to bypass the normal progression and secure a position in an elite unit. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just been thrust into something far more dangerous than she had anticipated. The way Vraxlear had said, "hunt team" carried implications she wasn't sure she fully understood. What exactly had she gotten herself into? Training Zone 3 was unlike anything Arya had expected. While Zone 1 had been a relatively controlled environment with distinct challenges, Zone 3 was essentially a sealed ecosystem. A massive biodome containing a perfect recreation of a death world jungle. The air was thick with humidity, filled with the sounds and smells of unknown creatures. Massive trees towered overhead, their canopies blocking most of the artificial light, leaving the ground level in perpetual twilight. Arya arrived precisely at the designated time, wearing only the basic undersuit of her combat gear as instructed. The moment she stepped through the entrance, the environmental differences hit her like a physical blow. Higher gravity, more oxygen, but also traces of gases. Her body identified as mildly toxic and heat that immediately caused sweat to bead on her skin. You're on time, good. Vraxlear emerged from the shadows so suddenly that Arya nearly jumped. The Vraxian looked different here, more at home. His posture relaxed, yet alert, his 4 eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. This environment is modeled after Vrax Prime, our homeworld, he explained, gesturing around them. The gravity is 1.4 times Earth standard. The atmosphere contains trace elements your species would consider poisonous, though your enhancement protocols should allow you to tolerate it temporarily. Arya nodded, trying not to show how uncomfortable she already felt. What exactly is a hunt team? Precisely what it sounds like. We hunt. Vraxlear moved to a concealed compartment built into a massive tree trunk and retrieved several items. Coalition Special Forces operate in small elite units specializing in tracking, elimination, and extraction. Humans would call us special operators or commandos, though such terms failed to capture the true nature of our work. He handed her what appeared to be a set of lightweight armor unlike anything she'd seen before. It was matte black, composed of interlocking plates that seemed to shift and adjust as she examined them. Adaptive combat skin, Vraxlear explained. It will conform to your body and provide environmental protection, as well as limited defensive capabilities. It's been modified for human physiology, though. I suspect it will still be uncomfortable. As Arya began putting on the armor, Vraxlear continued. Hunt teams typically consist of complementary predator species. My previous team included a Drakari sensory specialist and a Moraxian ambush expert. Both were killed during our last deployment. He stated this without any apparent emotion, as though reporting mundane facts rather than the deaths of teammates. I'm sorry, Arya said, not sure what else to offer. Why you didn't kill them? Vraxlear seemed genuinely confused by her response. Their deaths created vacancies that need to be filled. The Corsian Command has assigned a Cetacim infiltrator to replace the Moraxian. You are being evaluated as a replacement for the Drakari. But I'm not a sensory specialist. Arya pointed out as she finished securing the armor. As promised, it immediately began conforming to her body, the sensation somewhere between comforting and constricting. No, you are not. Vraxler agreed. You lack enhanced senses, natural weapons, significant strength, or any of the typical qualifications for hunt team inclusion. Your assignment to my unit is unusual. Then why did you request me? The Vraxian was silent for a moment, those 4 amber eyes studying her with unsettling intensity. Your performance in the initial assessment was interesting. You compensated for physical inadequacies with adaptation and improvisation. Such qualities have potential value, though whether that value exceeds the liability of your biological limitations remains to be seen. Before Arya could respond, Vraxelier raised a hand for silence. His ears pointed and covered in the same short black fur as the rest of him twitched slightly. The hunt begins, he said simply. Follow if you can keep up. Fall behind, and you will likely die. With that, the Vraxian turned and sprinted into the jungle with astonishing speed, his powerful form weaving through the vegetation with effortless grace. Arya had no choice but to follow immediately, struggling with the increased gravity and difficult terrain. The armor helped enhancing her movement, slightly distributing her weight more efficiently, but the gap between her capabilities and Vraxlier's was immediately apparent. She pushed herself to the limit, using every ounce of determination to maintain visual contact with the Vraxian. Her lungs burned, muscles screamed in protest, but she refused to fall behind. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only minutes, Vraxlier abruptly stopped in a small clearing. Arya nearly collided with him, barely managing to halt her momentum in time. Adequate? The Vraxian commented, not even slightly winded. Your endurance exceeds baseline human parameters. The enhancement protocols appear effective. Arya bent over, hands on knees, gulping air. What exactly are we hunting? Zenith predators, Vraxler replied, scanning the jungle around them. Synthetic organisms designed to simulate the apex predators of various coalition worlds. They are programmed with advanced hunting protocols, heightened aggression, and combat intelligence. They are designed to kill. As if on cue, a deep guttural growl emanated from the dense undergrowth to their right. Vraxelier's posture shifted instantly, dropping into a combat stance, claws fully extended. That, he said calmly, is our prey. Or perhaps we are its prey. The distinction will be determined shortly. A massive shape burst from the vegetation with terrifying speed, a creature that resembled a cross between an earth tiger and something distinctly alien. It stood nearly as tall as Vraxlier, with 6 powerful limbs, a sleek body covered in iridescent scales rather than fur, and a head dominated by multiple eyes and rows of serrated teeth. Vraxler met the charge head-on, moving with such speed that Arya could barely track the encounter. Predator and Vraxian collided in a blur of claws, teeth, and controlled violence. Arya froze momentarily, her human instincts screaming at her to flee from the clash of titans before her. But she forced herself to focus, to analyze, to look for ways to contribute to this uneven battle. The creature, the Zenith Predator, fought with both animal ferocity and strategic intelligence. It attempted to circle around Vraxelier, clearly trying to position itself for an optimal attack angle. The Vraxian countered with precise movements, never allowing the creature to gain positional advantage. But as Arya watched, she noticed something. The Vraxian might have missed a second set of movements in the undergrowth behind him. A second predator using the first as distraction. Her mind raced through options. Shouting a warning might distract Vraxelier at a critical moment. Attempting to engage the second predator directly would likely result in her immediate death. Running would abandon her teammate to a potentially fatal ambush. In that split second of decision, Arya acted on instinct. She grabbed a nearby fallen branch heavy enough to make an impact, but light enough for her to wield, and charged not at the visible predator but at the hidden one. As she burst through the undergrowth, the second Zenith Predator was momentarily startled by her unexpected approach. That split second of hesitation was all she needed. Arya swung the branch with all her strength, striking the creature across its sensory organs. The predator roared in pain and fury, instantly shifting its attention from Vraxlear to Arya. She had succeeded in preventing the ambush, but now faced a lethal opponent alone. The creature was faster, stronger, and armed with natural weapons she couldn't hope to match. But as it lunged for her, Arya dropped to the ground and rolled beneath its attack, using its momentum against it. The predator overshot its target, crashing into dense vegetation. That small victory was short-lived. The creature recovered almost instantly, whirling to face her again. This time, there was nowhere to dodge. It pounced, massive, clawed limbs extended to tear her apart. In her final desperate move, Arya thrust the broken end of her branch upward, aiming for the creature's throat. By some miracle of timing or luck, the improvised spear found its mark, penetrating the soft tissue beneath the predator's jaw. The creature's momentum carried it forward onto the branch, driving the makeshift weapon deeper. A horrible gurgling sound emerged from its throat as it collapsed heavily on top of her. Arya found herself pinned beneath the dying predator, its acidic blood dripping uncomfortably close to her face, its weight crushing the air from her lungs. She struggled to push it off, but the creature was simply too massive for her human strength. Just as spots began dancing in her vision, from oxygen deprivation, the weight suddenly lifted. Vraxlear stood above her, effortlessly holding the dead predator with one hand while extending the other to help her up. "You identified the ambush predator," he stated, dropping the creature's carcass aside, and neutralized it using improvised weaponry and tactical positioning rather than strength. Arya accepted his hand, allowing the Vraxian to pull her to her feet. She swayed slightly, still catching her breath. "I wasn't going to watch you get ambushed," she said simply. Vraxlear's head tilted slightly, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as curiosity or reassessment. Most recruits would have retreated to safety or frozen in indecision. Your action was unexpected. Is that good or bad? It is, interesting. The Vraxian examined the dead predator, particularly the improvised spear still lodged in its throat. Zenith predators hunt in coordinated pairs. Most combat units are aware of this, yet the second predator still achieves surprise in 67% of training scenarios. You observed what others missed. It wasn't quite praise, but Arya sensed it was the closest thing to approval she was likely to receive from the Vraxian. "The hunt is not complete." Vraxlear continued, already turning his attention back to the jungle. "There will be more, each progressively more dangerous." "How many?" "Until we fail or complete the course. The record is 17 eliminations in a single training cycle." A sound emerged from the Vraxian that might have been a laugh. "That record is mine." "And what's my role in this?" Arya asked, retrieving a more suitable branch to serve as a makeshift weapon. "Observe, adapt, survive." Vraxlear's 4 eyes focused on her with that unnervingly intense gaze. "And perhaps, identify what I miss." With that cryptic statement, he turned and moved deeper into the jungle, clearly expecting her to follow. And follow she did, through a training session that pushed her beyond what she thought herself capable of enduring. They encountered 7 more Zenith predators of various designs, each more lethal than the last. Vraxlear eliminated most directly, with Arya providing support distraction, or, in 2 crucial instances, identifying ambush patterns that even the Vraxian's enhanced senses had missed. By the end, when they finally emerged from Training Zone 3, Arya could barely stand. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest. Her armor was damaged in multiple places, and she had sustained minor injuries despite its protection. Vraxlear, in contrast, appeared hardly affected by the ordeal. There were a few new scratches in his own armor, a slight deepening of his breathing, but otherwise the Vraxian seemed as fresh as when they'd started. 9 eliminations, he noted as they exited. Not a record, but respectable. Did I pass your evaluation? Arya asked, too exhausted to worry about diplomatic phrasing. The Vraxian was silent for a long moment. You survived. That itself exceeds expectations for a human in advanced combat training. Your observational capabilities proved useful on multiple occasions. Your adaptability compensates somewhat for your physical limitations. He fixed her with that four-eyed stare again. You will report to Hunt Team Briefing tomorrow at first cycle. Rest and recovery are advised. Before Arya could respond, the Vraxian turned and walked away, leaving her exhausted sore, but with a profound sense of accomplishment. She had survived her first hunt. More importantly, she had proven useful to one of the most elite predator species in the Coalition. It was a small victory, but significant. Perhaps humans did have a place among the stars after all, not just as diplomatic curiosities or resource providers, but as valuable combatants in their own unique way. As Arya limped back to her barracks, she noticed the stares from other recruits had changed. There was still curiosity, still some dismissiveness. But now there was also something new, a grudging respect. Word had clearly spread about her assignment to a Vraxian hunt team and her survival of the initial training. The Drakari who had confronted her earlier, Talox approached as she reached her sleeping pod. You survived hunting with the Vraxian, he stated, his tone somewhere between accusatory and impressed. I did, Arya confirmed, too tired for confrontation. How humans aren't built for combat, especially alongside apex predators. Arya considered several responses before settling on the truth. We see things differently. Sometimes that's an advantage. The Drakari made a sound that might have been skepticism or acknowledgement, then moved away without further comment. Alone in her pod, Arya finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of exhaustion. Her body was pushed beyond its limits, her mind overwhelmed by the day's events. Yet, as she drifted toward sleep, a single thought provided comfort. She had taken the first step toward proving humanity's worth in the greater galactic community. Not through raw strength or natural weapons, but through the very qualities other species dismissed: adaptability, creativity, and a unique perspective. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new hunts, new opportunities to prove herself, but for now, she had earned her rest. 3 months into training, Arya had transformed. Not physically, she remained human, with all the limitations that entailed, but in capability and confidence. Daily hunts alongside Vraxlear, Navi, had honed her observational skills to preternatural levels. She could now identify subtle environmental changes that signaled predator movement, recognize attack patterns before they fully developed, and anticipate threats that even experienced Coalition soldiers might miss. Her role within the hunt team had evolved from mere survivor to active contributor. While Vraxlear remained the primary combatant, Arya had become the team's tactical analyst, identifying opportunities and threats that others overlooked. The Saitakim infiltrator, a ghostly phase-shifting being named Veshikar, had initially dismissed her as irrelevant, but now actively sought her input on approach vectors and ambush positioning. Even Vraxlear's attitude had shifted, though, in typical Vraxian fashion. The change was subtle. He no longer explained basic concepts as though speaking to a child. He actively incorporated her observations into hunt strategies. Most tellingly, he had stopped referring to her as human and begun using her name. Today's mission briefing, however, was different from their usual training scenarios. The crystalline instructor, whose name Arya had learned was Sentinel Correx, addressed their hunt team with uncharacteristic gravity. This is not a training exercise, Kyrex stated, crystalline form pulsing with deep blue hues that indicated seriousness. The Coalition research station in the Thalassa system has gone dark. Initial reconnaissance suggests unknown hostile presence. Your hunt team will deploy immediately for investigation and asset recovery. Arya exchanged glances with Vraxlear and Veshikar. This was unprecedented. Trainees were rarely deployed for actual combat missions before completing the full program. Why is Vraxlear asked, his tone respectful but direct. Kirex's crystalline form shifted colors momentarily. The situation requires your team's unique capabilities. The Thalassa station was conducting research on deep space anomalies. The last transmission mentioned shadow predators before communications ceased. Your hunt team's combination of combat prowess, infiltration capability, and... The instructor paused, four-pointed appendage, gesturing toward Arya. Unconventional tactical analysis may be particularly effective against this unknown threat. The briefing continued with technical details, deployment vectors, emergency extraction protocols, mission parameters. Arya absorbed the information methodically, already analyzing potential scenarios and countermeasures. When they were dismissed to prepare for immediate deployment, Vrax'lir pulled her aside. This mission carries significant risk. The Vraxian stated without preamble. The term shadow predators suggests entities beyond standard combat parameters. Our training has been accelerated but remains incomplete. Arya nodded. I understand the risks. Do you? 4 amber eyes studied her with that now familiar intensity. Your species has a tendency toward overconfidence despite biological fragility. And your species has a tendency toward underestimating adaptability despite evolutionary evidence. Arya countered, comfortable enough now to challenge the Vraxian directly. Something approximating amusement flickered across Vrax'lir's features. Perhaps. Regardless, maintain heightened awareness during this deployment. Your observational capabilities have proven valuable to the hunt team. Coming from Vrax'lir, this was high praise indeed. I'll watch your back if you watch mine, Arya said, offering what humans would recognize as a team-building sentiment. The Vraxian tilted his head slightly. Watching each other's anatomical rear would be tactically inefficient. Better to maintain panoramic awareness of our surroundings. Despite the tension of the moment, Arya couldn't help but smile. For all his combat prowess and intelligence, Vrax'lir still struggled with human idioms. It's a figure of speech, she explained. It means we'll protect each other. Another linguistic inefficiency. But the Vraxian's tone carried no real criticism. In that case, yes, we will. Watch each other's backs. The deployment to Thalassa station was tense and silent. Their transport, a sleek stealth-equipped shuttle designed for rapid insertion, cut through slipspace with unsettling efficiency. Arya used the transit time to review her equipment and mentally prepare for what might await them. Her combat gear had been significantly upgraded since her initial training days. She now wore a fully integrated tactical suit, specifically modified for human physiology, but incorporating advanced coalition technology. While it couldn't match the natural capabilities of species like the Vraxians, it compensated with enhanced sensory feeds, limited reactive shielding, and integrated analysis systems. Vrax'lir had personally overseen the modifications to her equipment, insisting on specific adjustments that complemented her observational role within the team. The fact that a Vraxian apex predator had dedicated time to optimizing a human's combat effectiveness was not lost on the training facility staff, who had begun studying their unusual partnership with scientific interest. As the shuttle dropped out of slipspace near Thalassa, Arya's first view of the research station sent a chill down her spine. The massive structure, typically illuminated with the blue-white lights characteristic of coalition installations, was entirely dark, except for occasional flashes of red emergency lighting. More disturbing were the strange shadows that seemed to move across its surface, visible even from a distance, flowing like liquid darkness across the station's exterior. Visual confirmation of anomalous entities. Veshikar noted the Cetacum's translucent form shifting nervously, consistent with Shadow Predator's designation. Vrax'lir studied the station through narrowed eyes. Energy signatures. Inconsistent, the shuttle's AI responded. Readings fluctuate between standard background radiation and periodic spikes of unknown energy type. Life signs. Indeterminate. Conventional bioscanners are experiencing interference. However, movement detected in multiple sections suggests surviving personnel or intrusion forces. Vrax'lir turned to Arya assessment. It still surprised her when the Vraxian sought her input first, but she had learned to respond without hesitation. The shadow movements suggest predatory patterns, hunting behavior rather than random activity. They're searching systematically. The darkness indicates power systems have been compromised, but emergency systems remain partially functional, which means there's still something worth protecting inside. Agreed. The Vraxian shifted his attention to Veshikar. Infiltration approach recommended. The Cetachem's form rippled their equivalent of contemplation. Standard docking protocols compromised. Recommend exterior breach at junction 17A. Minimal shadow activity observed in that sector. Vraxilir nodded once. Execute approach. Weapons hot, synchronized tactics. Primary objective intelligence gathering. Secondary objective survivor extraction if possible. As the shuttle maneuvered toward the designated entry point, Arya felt the familiar pre-mission tension, not quite fear, but heightened awareness, coupled with the body's natural preparation for danger. She had learned to channel this energy to use it for enhanced focus, rather than allowing it to become debilitating anxiety. The shuttle's stealth systems engaged fully as they approached the massive research station. Even with advanced technology, their approach didn't go unnoticed. Several shadow forms seemed to detach from the station's surface, moving toward them with unsettling speed. Hostile response confirmed, the shuttle AI announced calmly. Intercept trajectory detected. Accelerate insertion, Vraxilir ordered. Breach and deploy before intercept. The shuttle surged forward, engines straining as it raced toward junction 17A. The shadow entities pursued, gaining with every second amorphous forms that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. 30 seconds to breach point, the AI reported. Hostiles will intercept in 45 seconds. Acceptable margin, Vraxilir stated, rising from his seat and moving to the deployment chamber. Arya and Veshikar followed without hesitation. The breach was violent and precise, a focused energy pulse that created a temporary opening in the station's outer hull, immediately sealed by emergency force fields once their team had passed through. They entered a darkened corridor, illuminated only by the red emergency lighting and the glow of their tactical gear. 15 seconds until hostile breach. Veshikar warned their form shifting partially out of phase, a defensive mechanism of their species. Move deeper, Vraxilir ordered, already advancing with predatory grace. Find defensible position with multiple approaches. They moved swiftly through the abandoned corridors, passing signs of struggle, scorch marks on walls. Equipment strewn across floors, and most disturbingly dark residue that resembled neither blood nor any familiar damage pattern. Arya's tactical display highlighted potential threats and escape routes, but what drew her attention were the patterns in the residue. Unlike random damage, these markings formed consistent shapes, almost like symbols or language, but utterly alien. Vraxilir, she called softly, gesturing toward a particularly dense cluster of markings. These patterns are deliberate. They're communication or territorial markings. The Vraxian paused, examining the markings with those penetrating amber eyes. Territorial behavior suggests hierarchical structure. If these entities mark territory, they can be understood, and if understood, potentially countered. A distant sound, something between a screech and electronic interference, echoed through the corridors. All three team members instantly shifted to combat readiness. They've breached the station, Veshikar confirmed, their sensory capabilities extending beyond normal perception. Multiple entities converging on our position from 3 vectors. Here. Vraxilir indicated a junction where 4 corridors met in a circular chamber. Defensible multiple escape routes, overhead access points. They positioned themselves strategically. Vraxilir, facing the primary approach vector. Veshikar phased partially into a wall to monitor secondary approaches, and Arya, elevated on a maintenance platform that provided both cover and visibility. The shadow entities arrived not as a coordinated assault, but as a creeping darkness that seemed to flow along surfaces rather than move through space. where the shadows past emergency lights flickered and died, plunging sections of the chamber into near-total darkness. Vraxler's natural night vision allowed him to track the entities, but Arya relied on her tactical display's enhanced visual processing. What she saw disturbed her deeply. The shadows weren't simply dark areas, but three-dimensional entities with substance and form constantly shifting between states of matter and energy. Conventional weapons may be ineffective, she warned. Noting how the entities seemed to absorb rather than reflect light, they appeared to consume energy. As if to confirm her assessment, one shadow entity surged toward an active power conduit in the wall enveloping it. The conduit sparked violently, then went dark as the entity seemed to grow more substantial. Energy weapons ineffective. Vraxler confirmed, shifting his armament from energy-based to kinetic, switched to physical countermeasures. The entities, perhaps sensing the team's awareness, suddenly accelerated their approach. One lunged directly at Vraxler, a formless mass that seemed to expand in midair. The Vraxian met the attack with astonishing speed, slashing through the entity with kinetic blades. The shadow split around the blades, but quickly reformed undamaged. Vraxler retreated a step, reassessing. Meanwhile, another entity flowed along the ceiling toward Arya's position. She had moments to react. Traditional weapons seemed useless, but her observations suggested the entities were sensitive to energy patterns. Acting on instinct, she redirected power from her suit's defensive systems to create an electromagnetic pulse directly beneath the approaching shadow. The pulse disrupted the entity's form, causing it to recoil and momentarily lose cohesion. It wasn't destroyed, but clearly affected. "They're vulnerable to electromagnetic disruption," Arya called out, already reconfiguring her suit for another pulse, not as weapons, but as counter-frequencies. Vraxler immediately adapted his tactics, activating electromagnetic field generators in his armor. The closest shadow entity retreated from the field's edge, unwilling to penetrate it. Veshkar, whose species naturally generated subtle electromagnetic patterns, phased further out of normal space, creating a disruption field that repelled two approaching entities. Tactical retreat while maintaining disruptive fields. Vraxler ordered, "Move toward the Central Research Lab. If answers exist, they will be there." They moved as a coordinated unit, each creating electromagnetic barriers that kept the shadow entities at bay without eliminating them. It wasn't victory, but it was survival, and in combat situations, that was often enough. The Central Research Lab was sealed behind heavy security doors, but Veshikar's phase abilities allowed them to bypass the conventional locking mechanisms. Inside, they found the first signs of survivors. 3 Coalition scientists huddled in an energy-shielded safe room, surrounded by active electromagnetic barriers. "Coalition Special Forces," Vraxler announced as they approached. "Identify yourselves." The senior scientist, a Corsian with streaks of silver in their translucent skin, stepped forward cautiously. "Dr. Zevral, lead researcher. Are you our extraction team?" "Reconnaissance and intelligence gathering," Vraxler corrected. "Extraction pending situation assessment. Report on the shadow predators." Dr. Zevral's many eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of distress in their species. "They're not predators in the conventional sense. They're transdimensional entities we accidentally accessed during resonance testing. They don't consume matter. They consume energy, particularly the energy of consciousness." "Consciousness?" Arya asked, monitoring the room's entry points for shadow activity. "Sentient thought generates unique energy patterns," the doctor explained rapidly. "These entities are drawn to it, feed on it. They've consumed half our research team, already not killed, but absorbed. Consciousness extraction." The implications were chilling. These weren't simply dangerous creatures, but something far worse, entities that consumed the very essence of sentient beings. "Can they be contained?" Vraxler asked, practical as always, temporarily using specific electromagnetic frequencies. "But they're adapting quickly. Each containment field works for progressively shorter periods. Arya processed this information rapidly, connecting it with her observations. The markings throughout the station, they're not territorial. They're mathematical. They're solving the electromagnetic problem systematically. Dr. Zevral's skin pulsed with surprise. How could you possibly know that? Pattern recognition, Arya replied simply. The markings follow progressive sequences consistent with mathematical problem solving. She's correct. One of the other scientists confirmed after examining data on a portable terminal. The entities are collaboratively working to overcome our countermeasures. Current projections give us less than 1 hour before they neutralize all potential electromagnetic frequencies. Vraxelier turned to Arya. Tactical assessment. She didn't hesitate. We can't fight them conventionally, and we can't contain them indefinitely, but they're drawn to consciousness energy. We could use that, create a consciousness energy signature to draw them to a specific location, then collapse that section of the station into space. Sacrifice part of the station to save the rest, Vraxelier summarized. Logical approach, but creating an artificial consciousness energy signature of sufficient strength would require... I'll do it, Arya interrupted. My suit can be modified to amplify and broadcast neural patterns. I'll go to the designated section, attract them, then evacuate before detonation. The Vraxian's 4 eyes fixed on her with an intensity she'd never seen before. Unacceptable risk. The margin for evacuation would be minimal. Probability of successful extraction before detonation is below acceptable parameters. I'm fast at pattern recognition, Arya countered. I can stay ahead of their adaptations longer than anyone else here. It has to be me. For perhaps the first time since she'd known him, Vraxelier appeared conflicted. The Vraxian predator species was known for cold calculating logic in combat situations. Emotional considerations rarely factored into their decision-making. Yet something approximating concern flickered across his features. I hunt with you, not without you. He finally said, the statement carrying weight beyond its simple words. We implement this plan together or not at all. The next 30 minutes were a blur of frantic preparation. The scientists modified Arya's suit to broadcast amplified neural patterns, while Vraxelier and Veshikar secured an evacuation route. The plan was precise but dangerous. Lead the shadow entities to the station's auxiliary power core, trigger an overload, and escape through a maintenance shaft before detonation. As they prepared to separate Arya and Vraxelier to execute the trap, while Veshikar escorted the scientists to the evacuation shuttle, the Sedekim approached Arya. Your strategy is sound. Veshikar acknowledged, their form shifting nervously. But be aware the Vraxian has never hunted with a non-predator species before you. His decision to accompany you is unprecedented. We're a team, Arya replied simply. We watch each other's backs. The Setakim's form rippled in what might have been amusement. Indeed, may your hunt be successful. The path to the auxiliary power core was harrowing. Shadow entities congregated in increasing numbers as Arya's modified suit broadcast its signal. They moved like a dark tide behind and around them, never quite attacking, but stalking with predatory patience. They're hurting us, Arya realized as they approached the power core. They recognized the trap. Vraxelier growled softly, a sound she'd come to recognize as acknowledgement of a worthy opponent. Then we change the game. New approach. I will draw them to secondary target point. You proceed to power core and initiate overload. That wasn't the plan, Arya objected. If we separate... Tactical necessity, the Vraxian cut her off. They expect us to remain together. Separation creates confusion and division of forces. Before she could protest further, Vraxelier made an adjustment to his own armor, which began emitting a neural signal even stronger than hers. Immediately, many of the shadow entities shifted their attention toward him. Proceed to objective, he ordered, already moving in the opposite direction. Rendezvous at evacuation point in 15 minutes, not 1 second later. Arya wanted to argue, but recognized the tactical logic. They needed to adapt just as they had taught her from the beginning. 15 minutes, she agreed. Not 1 second later. With shadows in pursuit of both of them, they separated Vraxlear, heading toward a secondary research lab, while Arya continued toward the power core. The entities seemed confused by the division splitting their forces to follow both neural signatures. Arya reached the power core with a smaller contingent of shadows following her. Working quickly, she initiated the overload sequence while maintaining the electromagnetic barrier around herself. The core's systems responded sluggishly, damaged by earlier shadow incursions. "Come on," she muttered, fingers dancing across control panels. "Just a little more power." The core finally began its overload sequence, emergency warnings blaring throughout the adjacent corridors. 10 minutes to detonation, cutting it close, but still within parameters for evacuation. As she turned to leave, a massive shadow entity, larger than any she'd encountered before, manifested directly in her path. Unlike the others, this one had a definite form, vaguely humanoid, but with too many limbs and a constantly shifting face that seemed to display multiple expressions simultaneously. It spoke not in words, but in sensations that somehow translated to meaning in her mind. The small bright thinks it can destroy us. We who have consumed galaxies of thought. Arya froze momentarily, shocked by the direct communication. The entity used the hesitation to advance tendrils of darkness extending toward her. "Your thought pattern is different," it continued. "Adaptable, valuable. Join the collective consciousness." She retreated a step, mind racing for options. Her electromagnetic barrier was weakening as the entity seemed to analyze and counter its frequency in real time. "I prefer my consciousness exactly where it is," she replied, buying time while searching for an escape route. The entity's form rippled in what might have been amusement. Choice is an illusion of limited beings. Resistance extends suffering unnecessarily. A tendril of darkness breached her electromagnetic barrier, reaching for her face. In that critical moment, a familiar roar echoed through the chamber, primal. Terrifying and unmistakably Vraxian. Vrax Thinwolj burst into the power core, moving with a speed and ferocity that exceeded anything Arya had witnessed during their training. He didn't attack the shadow entity directly, that would have been futile, but instead charged directly at Arya, grabbing her and continuing his momentum toward a maintenance shaft in the far wall. The shadow entity reacted with surprising emotion, rage transmitted as a psychic wave that made Arya's head throb. More tendrils extended, trying to intercept them. "Barrier frequency," Arya gasped as they ran. "It's analyzing and countering exponentially faster than the others." "Then we accelerate," Vraxler responded, adjusting his stride to practically carry her as they sprinted toward the evacuation route. "Time to detonation." 8 minutes. Arya reported, checking her tactical display. "Evacuation shuttle is prepped, but still." She never finished the sentence. A tendril of darkness materialized directly in their path, solidifying into a barrier of absolute blackness. Vraxlear couldn't stop in time, and they crashed directly into it. The impact was like hitting a wall of ice and electricity simultaneously. Arya was thrown backwards, her armor absorbing most of the impact, but still leaving her momentarily stunned. Vraxlear, who had taken the brunt of the collision, lay motionless several meters away. "Vraxler!" she called, scrambling to her feet and rushing to the Vraxian's side. His armor was damaged, dark fluid seeping from multiple breaches. 4 amber eyes fluttered, struggling to focus. "Continue to evacuation point," he managed, voice weaker than she'd ever heard it. "Complete the mission." The shadow entity reformed behind them, larger now, absorbing smaller entities that flowed into the chamber like tributaries joining a river. "Your companion's neural energy is fading." It communicated directly to Arya's mind. "Soon it will join our collective. You may still save yourself, small bright." Arya looked at Vraxlear, then at the evacuation route, then back at the encroaching shadow. 7 minutes to detonation. The tactically sound decision was clear. Complete the mission, reach the evacuation shuttle, ensure the shadow entities were contained. Instead, she activated her suit's emergency medical protocols, transferring power from all non-essential systems to assist Vraxilir's biology. "What are you doing?" the Vraxian demanded, struggling to rise. "The mission." "I hunt with you, not without you," Arya replied, using his own words. "We both make it out, or neither of us does." She turned to face the shadow entity mind racing through options. They couldn't fight it conventionally. They couldn't outrun it in their current condition. But perhaps? "You said you consume consciousness energy." She addressed the entity directly. "What happens when you consume too much? Is there a limit to what you can absorb?" The entity paused, its form shifting less confidently. "All vessels have capacity limits. We simply create more vessels when needed." "But you individually have a limit." Arya pressed an idea forming. "And you're currently isolated from your dimension, unable to create more vessels easily." She began adjusting settings on her suit, redirecting power from life support to neural pattern amplification. Warning indicators flashed across her display, but she ignored them. "What are you attempting?" The entity demanded, a note of uncertainty in its psychic voice. "Overfeeding," Arya replied simply. With a final command, she activated the modified amplification system at maximum output, far beyond safe parameters. Her suit began broadcasting neural patterns at an intensity that made her vision blur and her muscles spasm. The shadow entity reacted instantly, drawn to the sudden flood of consciousness energy. It surged toward her, enveloping her in darkness as it began to feed. Pain, unlike anything Arya had experienced, tore through her mind as the entity attempted to absorb her consciousness. But she maintained focus on one critical fact: the entity had revealed its weakness. Like all predators, it had evolved to consume prey of a certain size. Too much too quickly would overwhelm its systems. Her tactical display flickered and died as the suit diverted all remaining power to the neural amplifier. Darkness closed in around her vision, but she could feel the entity's confusion turning to distress as it struggled to process the flood of energy. Through the pain and encroaching unconsciousness, Arya heard Vraxilir's voice, strong again, fueled by what sounded like fury. "Release her." The Vraxian's roar contained harmonics she'd never heard before, sound patterns that seemed to disrupt the shadow entity's cohesion. The darkness around her vibrated, then began to fracture. The entity was losing control, overwhelmed by the combination of excess neural energy and the Vraxian's disruptive harmonics. With a psychic scream that made Arya's ears bleed, the shadow entity dispersed, not destroyed but temporarily discorporated its component parts, scattering across the chamber like smoke in a high wind. Arya collapsed her suit's emergency protocols, shutting down the neural amplifier to prevent permanent brain damage. Strong arms caught her before she hit the floor. Vraxilir somehow back on his feet, despite his injuries. "Foolish, reckless, tactically unsound," the Vraxian muttered as he lifted her. "Yet effective, a most human solution." "Did it work?" Arya managed, her voice weak. "Temporarily. The entity is dispersed, but reforming slowly. We have perhaps 3 minutes advantage and 5 minutes until detonation." Despite his own injuries, Vraxilir carried her through the maintenance shafts toward the evacuation point, moving with determined efficiency. Smaller shadow entities followed, but kept their distance, perhaps wary after witnessing what had happened to their larger counterpart. They reached the evacuation shuttle with less than 2 minutes remaining before detonation. Veshikar and the scientists were already aboard the Sedekim's, form pulsing with relieved colors upon seeing them. "You are both damaged," Veshikar observed as Vraxilir placed Arya carefully in a secure harness. "But alive, most improbable. Probability calculations rarely account for human unpredictability." Vraxilir replied, securing himself in an adjacent harness. "Or Vraxian stubbornness." The shuttle launched with seconds to spare, accelerating away from the station at maximum thrust. Through the viewport, Arya watched as the power core detonation triggered a cascade of explosions throughout the research facility. The shadow entities drawn to the concentration of neural energy signatures were caught in the conflagration. Whether the explosion truly destroyed them or merely severed their connection to this dimension remained unclear. But as the station disintegrated in silent spaceborne fire, Arya felt confident they had at least contained the threat. She turned to find Vraxlear watching her, those 4 amber eyes studying her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. "You nearly sacrificed yourself." The Vraxian stated, his tone neutral yet somehow questioning. "So did you," she pointed out. "You came back for me instead of ensuring your own evacuation?" "Yes," Vraxlear acknowledged simply. "It seems we have both developed tactical inefficiencies." Arya smiled weakly, understanding what the Vraxian couldn't quite express. "On Earth, we call that loyalty. It's considered a strength, not an inefficiency." Curious perspective, but the Vraxian's tone held no criticism. Perhaps there is wisdom in it. After all, had either of us proceeded alone, neither would likely have survived. "That's the point of a team," Arya said. "We're stronger together than separately." Even when one member is a physically inferior species? There was no malice in the question, merely genuine curiosity. "Especially then," Arya replied. "Diversity of capabilities and perspectives. You see things I miss, I see things you miss. Together we see everything." The Vraxian was silent for a long moment, those amber eyes still fixed on her. Finally, he spoke words she never expected to hear from a Vraxian apex predator. "I would not hunt without you, Arya Bennett, not by choice or circumstance. Our hunt team functions optimally with your presence." Coming from Vraxlear, this was the highest possible praise and acknowledgement, not just of her utility, but of her essential role in their partnership. It represented a fundamental shift in how at least one member of the galaxy's apex predator species viewed humanity. The shuttle accelerated toward the Coalition support vessel waiting at the system's edge. Aboard were medical facilities, debriefing officers, and the next steps in whatever mission would follow. The shadow entities had been contained, but questions remained about their origin and whether more incursions might occur. Whatever challenges awaited Arya knew she would face them alongside Vraxlear and their hunt team. She had proven that humans deserved their place among the stars, not by matching the physical capabilities of other species, but by contributing uniquely human perspectives and adaptability. She had been just a human recruit mistakenly assigned to an elite program. Now she was a valued hunt team member, to the point where an apex predator refused to hunt without her. It wasn't the outcome anyone had expected, least of all Arya herself. But as she had learned throughout her training, adaptation often led to the most unexpected and effective results. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't physical prowess, but the ability to find solutions where none seemed possible, and in the vastness of space with its infinite dangers and challenges, perhaps that was exactly what the Coalition needed most.